Picture this. You're in Beijing. The year is 1584. You are standing in the most remote courtyard of the Forbidden City. The walls are damp. The paint is peeling. Weeds push through cracks in the stone floor because no one bothers to pull them anymore. The silk robes you wore yesterday are gone, replaced with plain cotton, rough against your skin, the cheapest fabric the palace stocks. The jade hairpins that once marked your rank, confiscated. The golden filigree combs your mother sent from the provinces when you first entered the palace, taken and never returned. The servants who dressed you each morning, who prepared your cosmetics, who arranged your hair into the elaborate styles required by your station, every single one of them reassigned overnight. You have one attendant now. One. She brings your meals through a slot in the door. She does not speak to you. She has been ordered not to. When you call out to her, when you press your face against a crack in the door and beg her for news, for a word, for anything, she walks away. You can hear her footsteps receding down the corridor. Then, silence. A silence so complete it fills the room like water, and you realize that this silence is not temporary. This silence is your new life. Your name is Wang. 6 years ago, you were a maid in the Empress Dowager's chambers, a teenager scrubbing floors and folding sheets. Then, one afternoon, the Emperor of China, the Wanli Emperor, the most powerful man on earth, walked through his mother's quarters and noticed you. What happened next was not a love story. It was a transaction. He took what he wanted, and weeks later, you were pregnant with his child. When the Empress Dowager confronted her son, he denied everything. He did not want you. He was embarrassed by your existence. You were a palace maid, the lowest rung, a girl without family connections, without status, without anything that would make an emperor proud to claim you. But his mother produced the records. Every imperial visit was logged by eunuchs, dates, times, chambers. There was no denying it. The emperor was forced to acknowledge the child and give you a title, Consort Gong. Not because he cared about you, because his mother left him no other choice. You gave birth to a son, the emperor's firstborn, the heir that 2,000 years of tradition demanded would one day sit on the dragon throne. And for that, the emperor never forgave you. Because you had given him a son he did not want, by a woman he wished he had never touched. His heart belonged to another, noble Consort Zheng, a woman he actually chose, a woman he actually loved, a woman whose son he wanted on the throne instead of yours. And so the emperor did something worse than executing you. He erased you. He sent you here, to the palace of great brilliance, the most remote of the 6 eastern palaces. He stripped your allowance. He forbade your son from visiting. He ordered the servants to withhold your coal in winter and your water in summer. And then he simply stopped thinking about you. You are 19 years old. You will spend the next 27 years in this room. You will cry every day until you go blind, and you will die here in the dark, without ever seeing the face of the son you brought into this world. This is the cold palace, not a single building, not a single room. It was a sentence, a word spoken by an emperor that could transform any corner of the Forbidden City into a tomb for the living. And what happened to the women sent there was so deliberately cruel, so systematically designed to break the human spirit, that the very name became synonymous with a fate worse than death for over 2,000 years. If this story grips you, subscribe and leave a like. It takes a second and helps us keep uncovering the histories that empires try to bury. Because what comes next is far worse than anything you have heard so far. Most people hear the words cold palace and imagine a building, a specific place somewhere inside the Forbidden City with a plaque on the gate and guards standing watch. They are wrong. The last emperor of China, Puyi, clarified it himself in his autobiography years after the dynasty collapsed. There was no palace in the Forbidden City officially designated as the Cold Palace. There never had been. The Cold Palace, or Lengong, was a concept, not a location. It was whatever room, whatever corridor, whatever forgotten corner of the imperial complex the emperor decided to turn into a prison for a woman who had displeased him. Wherever a concubine was banished, that place became the Cold Palace. And that is precisely what made it so terrifying. Because it meant that no woman in the entire Forbidden City was ever truly safe. The room you slept in tonight could become your cell tomorrow. The courtyard where you walked with your friends this morning could become the place where you spent the next 40 years utterly alone. All it took was one word from one man, one flash of imperial anger, one whispered accusation from a jealous rival, and the walls that had been your home became your cage. The locations varied across dynasties. During the Han Dynasty, the system was formalized under an office called the Yetingling, which administered female prisoners. Disgraced concubines and palace women were sent to a prison known as the Yongxiang, the Eternal Alley. During the Ming Dynasty, it was often the Palace of Great Brilliance in the far northeast corner, or the Ganxi Palace tucked behind the Imperial Garden, or the narrow corridors between palace walls known as the Sandwich, spaces so tight a person could barely turn around. During the Qing Dynasty, it was the North Three Chambers beyond the Jingxi Pavilion, a cluster of rooms so poorly maintained that by the early 20th century, the entire structure had collapsed into rubble. Different addresses across different centuries, the same sentence every time. The system worked through deprivation. Not violence, not chains, not the dramatic punishments that fill historical television dramas. The Cold Palace destroyed women through the slow, methodical removal of everything that made life bearable. It started with your title. The moment an emperor banished you, your rank was stripped. You went from imperial consort, a woman who ate from porcelain dishes embossed with golden dragons and wore silk embroidered by the finest seamstresses in the empire, to nothing. Your name was removed from the palace registry. Your allowance, the monthly stipend that paid for your food, your clothing, your servants, your medicine, your incense, your candles, everything that separated existence from mere survival, was canceled. You were not executed. You were simply cut off from the system that kept you alive. Then came the servants. A high-ranking concubine might have a dozen attendants. Women who dressed her before dawn, prepared her cosmetics, arranged her hair, selected her jewelry, managed her meals, cleaned her quarters, maintained her wardrobe, handled her correspondence, and monitored her health. In the Cold Palace, you were allowed one, sometimes none, and the servants assigned to Cold Palace duty were often the lowest, most resentful members of the household. Eunuchs who had been punished for their own offenses and resented being sent to the most miserable posting in the entire palace. Maids who saw an opportunity to take out their frustrations on someone who no longer had the power to fight back. Because here is what every servant in the Forbidden City understood instinctively. A woman in the Cold Palace had no protector. No one would punish you for mistreating her. No one would even know. And this is where something perverse happened. The eunuchs, the very men at the bottom of the palace hierarchy, actually competed for cold palace assignments. Why? Because the concubines banished there had often been women of extraordinary wealth. They still had hidden jewelry, bribable contacts, stashed valuables they would trade for an extra bowl of rice or a piece of news from the outside world. Eunuchs who served the cold palace could extract payment from desperate women for the smallest kindnesses: a warm meal, a clean cloth, a whispered rumor about whether the emperor was still alive. The lowest people in the palace found someone even lower, and they profited from her desperation. Historical accounts from multiple dynasties describe attendants who deliberately spilled food, who refused to clean chambers for weeks at a time, who stole the meager provisions meant for the banished women and sold them in the palace markets for personal profit. One account from the late Qing dynasty, written by a eunuch named Kui Yugui, describes visiting the cold palace where Consort Zhen was being held. He noted that the door was locked from the outside and that food and washing water were passed in through a window. The woman inside could not open her own door. She existed in solitary confinement, except her crime was loving an emperor who had tried to reform his own government. Think about what that means. You are a woman who was raised in a noble family, selected from the 8 Banners elite, or plucked from a provincial home and brought to the palace as a teenager. You were trained from the moment you arrived to be attended, to be served, to exist within a system that managed every detail of your life, down to the dishes you ate from and the colors you wore. You do not know how to cook. You do not know how to mend your own clothes. You have never drawn your own water or lit your own fire. And now you are alone in a room that no one cleans, wearing clothes that no one repairs, eating food that arrives cold and often spoiled if it arrives at all, and no one is coming to check on you. No one is asking whether you are well, because in the eyes of the empire, you have ceased to exist. The physical conditions were devastating.